The screams of a mother pierced through the humid night air, echoing down the cracked pavement of Harmony Street. Blood pooled under the body of her son, a 16-year-old boy who'd been caught in the crossfire of a gang dispute. His backpack lay open beside him, books stained red. A street lamp flickered above, casting shadows on the graffiti-covered walls, as the small crowd that had gathered dispersed at the sound of approaching sirens. Lyon sat in his car a block away, watching the scene through the smudged windshield. The faint hum of the police scanner on his dashboard confirmed what he already knew. The shooter was long gone, and the cops weren't likely to find him. Another family would bury a child. Another name would be added to the growing list of victims. Malcolm Lewis. 16, he murmured, his voice low and gravelly. The names never left him. He carried each one like a stone in his chest, a weight that kept him moving forward. A knock on the passenger side window broke his trance. He glanced over to see Panther, his right-hand man, standing under the faint glow of the streetlight. Vincent, Panther Wright, had a quiet presence that belied his ferocity. His broad shoulders and sharp eyes gave him the look of a predator, always on the hunt. Lyon unlocked the door, and Panther slid in, carrying the faint scent of weed and vodka. "It's Shark," Panther said, cutting straight to the point. Lyon didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stared out at the distant lights of the ambulance now pulling onto the scene. Malcolm's mother had collapsed on the pavement, her sobs muffled by the chaos. "Shark's been getting too comfortable," Panther continued. "One of his boys did this. Word is they was trying to get someone else, but the kid got in the way." Lyon nodded slowly. "Then it's time." Panther didn't ask for clarification. He didn't need to. When Lyon said it was time, there was no turning back. Later that night, the abandoned warehouse on the edge of the neighborhood served as the Mapogo's headquarters. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of oil and rust. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, casting harsh light over the faces of the four men gathered around the battered metal table. Lyon stood at the head of the table, his imposing frame commanding attention. His gray-bearded jawline and piercing eyes gave him an aura of authority that was impossible to ignore. "Fuck Shark and everything he stands for," Cobra spat, slamming his fist on the table. Tyrese. Cobra Jones was the youngest of the group, his energy and impulsiveness often walking the fine line between asset and liability. His snake tattoo rippled as he flexed his arm, his anger barely contained. "We don't just hit him," Lyon said, his voice calm but firm. "We cut him off completely. His suppliers, his dealers, anyone who's keeping him in business, Turtle." Elijah, Turtle Banks, nodded and slid a map across the table. His methodical nature had earned him his nickname, and he always came prepared. "Shark's main operation runs out of the old auto shop on Jefferson. He's got a stash house 2 blocks over and a drop point near the scrapyard. We hit all 3 tonight, take out his network in one sweep." Cobra grinned, his eagerness evident. "And Shark?" "Leave his ass to me, pause," Lyon said. The mission the night was humid, the kind of Louisiana heat that clung to the skin and made every breath feel like a chore. The Mapogo moved in silence, their black clothing blending seamlessly with the shadows. Cobra and Panther took the stash house, moving with practiced precision. Panther led the way, his movements fluid and controlled. Cobra, however, was a coiled spring, his fingers twitching on the trigger of his .50 cal. Inside, 2 of Shark's men were lounging on a couch, oblivious to the danger creeping through their door. Cobra burst in first, his gun leveled. "Hands up! Now!" he barked. One of the men reached for a weapon, but Cobra didn't hesitate. A single shot rang out, and the man crumpled to the floor. The second man froze, his hands shooting into the air. Panther stepped forward, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to Cobra's intensity. "Where's Shark?" "I don't know." The man stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. Cobra's patience ran out. He grabbed the man by the collar and pressed the barrel of his gun to his temple. "Wrong answer." "Cobra," Panther said warningly, but it was too late. Cobra pulled the trigger, the sound echoing in the small room. Panther stared at the young enforcer, his jaw tight. "This ain't a game, Tyrese." "He wasn't going to talk," Cobra shot back, holstering his weapon. Panther didn't argue. Instead, he turned and began searching the room, finding a ledger that listed Shark's contacts and delivery schedules. The interrogation shark was dragged into Rhino's hog barn hours later, his face bloodied and his swagger gone. The smell of mud and sweat filled the air as the hogs grunted and shuffled in their pens. Lion stood over him, his expression cold and unyielding. "You've been poisoning this community for years, Dre. Kids like Malcolm Lewis are dead because of you." Shark spat blood on the floor. "You think you some kind of hero? You're just a thug with a cause." Lion knelt down, grabbing Shark by the collar and forcing him to look into his eyes. "The difference between us is that I don't prey on the weak. You do." Rhino stood in the shadows, his massive frame casting a long shadow over the scene. He didn't say a word, but his presence was enough to unnerve even the toughest of men. "Do it," Lion said. Stepping back, Shark's protest turned to screams as Rhino dragged him toward the pens. The hog's frenzied squeals drowned out the sounds of his struggle. Epilogue: Detective Sarah Lawson stood outside the auto shop the next morning, surveying the scene. Shark's men had scattered, and the operation was dismantled, but Shark himself was nowhere to be found. "This has Mapogo written all over it," her partner said, shaking his head. Lawson's jaw tightened. "They're not untouchable. We'll find them." Meanwhile, Lion watched from a rooftop nearby, his sharp eyes scanning the streets below. The Mapogo had won this battle, but he knew the war was far from over. "It's just getting started," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the distant hum of the city.